Hi friends, it's Paul Ward and welcome to Farm Talk. You may have been to a parade and seen the tractors drive down the street with the flags waving, but you don't know much more about farm equipment than that. Well, who better to talk to than our guest today, than Elena Brokaw with the Ventura County Agriculture Museum. Welcome to Farm Talk.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So this building that we're in is as I mentioned, the Ventura County Agriculture Museum, but it's also known as the Mill.
Yes.
And we are in Santa Paula, California.
Yes.
Kind of wedged between Ventura to the west and Magic Mountain, Valencia to the east, for folks that don't know. So what was the mill?
The mill was built in the late 19th century, in about 1888. It was, we're right on a railroad track. So there's the depot across the railroad tracks and then the mill here. And we were like an early packing house. Okay. So we were where the produce was stored before it got on the train to go east and feed everybody out there. That's what it was. And it became, and I don't know when, Paul, it became the mill sometime in the 1900s. A family known as the Henscholds, that was their name, turned it into an amazing place. So it had feed, it had tackle, it had little baby kittens, it had little baby chicks. And it was, I grew up here in Santa Paula and we used to love to come to the mill. Full day event here. The family eventually closed it. And about 20, 30 years later, it got reborn as the Agriculture Museum.
Okay. And it's now one of the biggest and well-known ag museums in the country. I mean, there's thousands of artifacts here.
Yes, thousands of artifacts, absolutely. So the Museum of Ventura County, this is one of the branches of the Museum of Ventura County, which, by the way, has been around since 1913, and it is the repository of history, art, and culture for our region. In about the 1950s, we had a very active volunteer who started going out and collecting farm equipment. So, you know, the world changes very quickly and farming practices change very quickly. So he went out and he saw people sort of decommissioning tractors and plows and bean threshers and carriages and what have you, and took them into the museum's collection. And they actually were spread out all over the county. So you talked about it at a road stand. That might have been one of our tractors that was collected by us. And we had no place to show them. So about 2010, this building was found and it was redone and it turned into the home for those agricultural implements. What you see whenever anybody comes to the Agriculture Museum, they're going to see 1.5% of our actual collection.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It's a vast repository somewhere else of stuff.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, blacksmithing tools. I can't even tell you how many. I could tell you, but I'm not going to go look it up. Nobody cares how many blacksmithing tools, but we have a lot of them. And they are stored off-site here. So whenever you come here, you're going to see, for example, there's a walnut dryer behind you over there. That's one of the walnut dryers that we have. We chose that one because we know the story behind that walnut dryer, and that is why we were showing it.
Interesting. And every piece of equipment does have a story. I mean, it's kind of fascinating that it's in here, it's been polished, it's been shined, but these were working tools for decades.
Oh, absolutely. And, Ventura County is an agricultural county. That is the basis of our industry, of our economy. We always have been. Oil was also a big industry here, but agriculture preceded that. And what you see is you're able to walk through and kind of learn the story of agriculture in our county. And the story is really fascinating. We think of agriculture as we think of it in a kind of a nostalgic way. It was another way of life. It was a simpler way of life. But in actuality, it is an incredibly creative industry. So we have gone through many different types of farming in this county. We started off in the 1900s when we had an actual industry. In the 1900s, it started with cattle ranching. So that's what we did. Right. That's what was here in Ventura County. Cattle. There was a devastating flood in 1862. It's the costliest natural disaster we've ever had in California, much more costly than the Great Earthquake in San Francisco. And cattle died. And then after that, there was a devastating drought. More cattle died. They changed their entire basis to sheep. So we started being a sheep farming place, selling wool, etc.
Probably talking 1860s, 1870s.
That was in the 1870s. And then in the late 1870s, there was another devastating drought. And 50,000 sheep died in a day.
Wow.
Absolutely shocking. Imagine what that was like.
Incredible.
As you're a farmer and your everything is gone in a day and you don't know what's going to happen. So from there, we started going into farming grains, and that's really where we have continued. We don't do livestock. We do a little bit. There's a little bit of livestock farming here, but mostly it's produce.
So the museum is showcasing equipment, but it's also showcasing the people that own the equipment, that work the land, the farmers themselves, the farm workers. It's kind of all-encompassing.
Right. So if you look at a piece of equipment, it's interesting, right? It's somebody invented it, somebody put it together. It's interesting what it runs on. It's certainly different from the tractors that they have nowadays, right? And if we're just talking about tractors, there's no computer needed, right? People can go in and fix it on their own. And that's interesting to a way. But what is, to my mind, and this is what we try to relay at the museum, what's really interesting is who bought that tractor? Was it their first tractor? Did they save up? Did their father-in-law give them the money for that tractor? What were they doing with that tractor? What doors did that tractor open for them? Did this turn into, generational wealth for this farmer? Or was this something where there was a terrible disaster and they couldn't recuperate? And that's really what we try to talk about. And there's a through line with the museum. We think about the past and it's gone. And we think about it as having belonged somewhere else, but there were people just like us, eating the same things we eat, sleeping the same hours we sleep, falling in love, going to school and getting a bad grade. All of that was still there. So that's what we try to show and bring out in our exhibits.
And you're showing adults, but you're also showing kids what life was like 100 years ago.
Yeah, when I started at the museum 8 years ago, my son was 5 and my mother was in her 80s. We'll just leave it there. And this museum, it was a place, and I was between those two ages. And this museum was a place where all three of us could go and have a really great experience. It was a very different experience. So I'm going to say this story. There, as I said, there are two branches to the museum. There's a branch in downtown Ventura right across from the Mission, and that's pretty much our art and history museum. And then there's the Agriculture Museum here. So I started working at the museum. My son is 5. I made him go to work with me, and I would say, we're going to the museum. And he goes, are we going to the good museum or the bad museum? And I was like, we're going to the good museum, which is this museum. They're both wonderful. They're both great. But he loved it. He came in, he could run around. It's a safe place. He can climb on tractors. There's bees. There's a live working beehive here.
Beehive inside.
Everybody loves the beehive. All of us would go see that. And then for my mother and me, we could go and talk about the past and what farming practices there were and what's going to be in the future. And then, of course, we all went shopping.
Of course.
In the gift store.
Of course. There's a lot of stuff in the gift store. So in terms of the people that work the land and the families that work the land, there's a whole exhibit as well of farming families and what life was like.
Yes, Ventura County was where the Chumash Native Americans made their home, and they foraged, right? There was no traditional agricultural practices. So they fished, they hunted, and they gleaned from trees and bushes. And then the Spaniards came, and that's when the mission was established in 1782, and they began to do farming practices like we think about with irrigation, etc. And after the Spaniards were here, Ventura County became part of Mexico. Mexico took over from the Spanish, and that was the Rancho era. So we had rancheros. And during all of this, so we got people coming from different countries here. After the ranchero period was what we call the gold rush pioneer time, and people were coming from the East Coast mostly. And as they did, they brought with them their own practices, their own ways of living, And then new people started to come in to do the agricultural work. So sort of the first people doing the actual agricultural labor were the Chumash. And then when we were part of Mexico, Mexicans. And it continued like that. So it's actually really fascinating how Ventura County is a microcosm of nationally what was happening. So as we had Chinese workers coming in and working on the railroads, we also had many Chinese agricultural workers here. And there was a Chinese Exclusion Act, and we had not as many Japanese workers starting to come in. One of my favorite stories about the actual laborers is in 1904. The sugar beet factory in Oxnard,
Right.
had been opened. You know all about this.
Which, well, I'll let you say. The Oxnard brothers never lived in Oxnard.
No, it's amazing. No. But they were looking for a great place to open a sugar beet factory, and they chose this unnamed place that was not yet a city, which became known as Oxnard because of the 4 Oxnard brothers. So they opened the sugar beet factory, and the laborers there were mostly Mexican and Japanese. And they actually formed the Japanese-Mexican Labor Alliance together and had a strike, a successful strike.
Interesting.
For working conditions back in 1904. I love that story because it shows we're better together, we're stronger together, and then we have more in common than we think we do.
Right. And then also the Fillmore Citrus Association had a band.
Oh, yeah. Fillmore Citrus Association. I think that was in the 1920s.
Okay.
Actually. And it was the Fillmore Citrus Association Mexican Marching Band, actually. They were in parades, just like you said. They had a drum that is a part of our collection. It's actually on display at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. right now. There were many groups like that were formed by the employers themselves. So Limonera had many, many laborers living at their ranch. They have a ranch here in Santa Paula, and they did the same kind of thing.
Wonderful. And then, of course, the railroad changed everything, right? Because now you could ship produce long distances.
Oh, yeah. The railroad changed everything. And like I said, this was built as a packing house right next to the railroad in 1888. So as it progressed ever further, it opened up our ability to export agriculture tremendously. So before that, we had the wharfs. We had a wharf in Oxnard and a wharf in Ventura. And they were pretty good for business. We did a lot of business that way. But really, the railroad made it possible for our little county to become a major provider of produce for the United States.
Yeah. So when student groups come here, it's a whole experience. Is it mostly grade schoolers or teachers that are kind of local, or are they coming regionally?
We provide a specific school tour here. It's free. It's free for Title I schools, which is where 65% or more of the children qualify for a free lunch program. And the curriculum that we teach here is directed to second graders.
Okay.
So they come in, they plant a lima bean seed because lima beans were the first dry crop that we had here after the sheep died in the late 1800s. They learn about picking. They learn about bees. There are 4 different stations. So the idea is that they get a sense that food comes from a very specific place. It's not from the grocery store, and they get a sense of what it takes to grow it, how much time it takes to grow, and then they walk away with more appreciation of our county's role in everybody's day-to-day life.
That's wonderful. And then outside, there's a whole vegetable garden and harvesting and native plant garden.
Yes, we are very lucky. We are partnered with the UC Master Gardeners program, which is an amazing program. It's all volunteers, and they are so dedicated. They're wonderful. And they have put in a bunch of raised plant beds. So we've got tomatoes, we've got corn, we've got eggplant, everything that's like that you can grow locally around here, which is how lucky are we to live here?
Of course.
I mean, it's really remarkable. I think we sometimes take it for granted, so I try to remember. Yes, and you can go out anytime. They will give you tours, and we also, as you said, have the Helen Pidduck native plant garden, which is just a nice place for people to walk around. It's a little bit of peace.
what's the future look like for the Ag Museum?
The Ag Museum is in Santa Paula. It's one of the smallest cities in the county. It's interestingly, it used to be the second largest city in the county.
Really?
As recently as the 1930s.
Because it's only like 35,000 people now.
Yeah. It used to be 16,000 people in like 1920, 30, which was bigger than Oxnard. If you can imagine, it was during World War II that Oxnard really boomed, and the other cities have grown, and Santa Paula hasn't. So Santa Paula is an amazing little gem of a city. We've got a beautiful historic downtown. It's walkable. There are multiple museums here. There's an airport that is totally accessible with a cafe. It's really a wonderful little city. So our goal is to be part of the county's must-do day trips, right? We want you to have to come out here, have some incredible food, have something at the local winery, cider place, and come and visit the Agriculture Museum along with the Art Museum, along with the Aviation Museum, and really get to know part of what makes your county so special.
Wonderful. And how can folks get a hold of tour groups and learn more about the museum if they want to come check it out?
Easiest thing to do is just go online, venturamuseum.org. And if you're a teacher and you want to come out here, we would love to have you. We want to get to every city, every school in the county. And there's an education tab. Just go there and we will hook you up. If you're not a teacher, you can go on Facebook, Ventura Museum, Instagram, all those things. I'm old. I don't know. But we're on all of them.
Gotcha.
All of the socials.
Of course.
Yeah, Ventura Museum.
So we were talking earlier about the equipment having stories behind them. How can folks learn more about that in particular?
Each one of those items has an accession number and has the details about it, where we got it from, when it was made, what it was meant to be used for, what it was actually used for, who owned it, and anything, particularly special about it. So we have this massive database that has as many of those pieces of information as we possibly can. And that helps us interpret these pieces. So, for example, here, there is a short-handled hoe on exhibit. Little hoe, about this big. We've all seen a long-handled hoe. It's a short-handled hoe. It was outlawed in the late 1900s, and it was used for farm labor, for close, hunch down and hoe.
So back-breaking work.
Can you imagine? All day long. So I don't remember who we got that short-handled hoe from, but that is an example. You can see that and you can think, oh my goodness, what it must have been like, the experience of doing that day in, day out. And, obviously we still drive along and there are farm laborers out there and they're still stooped over.
Right.
We see them every day. So those are some of the types of stories that we can tell.
How does the museum decide when to rotate the exhibits?
The museum rotates the exhibits when we have had enough time to put together a story that we think is going to inspire curiosity or compassion in people. So, for example, we recently had in our Ventura site, we had an exhibit called The Murder of Tom Moore. Rancho Sespe, which was one of the 14 ranchos in Ventura County, had been sold by the original ranchero, Mr. Carrillo, Don Carrillo, to a man who came from Ohio named Tom Moore. When he came out, it was about the same time that the Homestead Act was created by the United States government. And the Homestead Act told people, hey, there's plenty of property out there, right? The goal was to get people out here to what was a new state at that point, very new state, 1850, and start, populating it. So you could come out, and if you dug a well and you built any kind of structure, you got 160 acres for free.
Which now I think is big, but not big compared to these ranches, which were thousands.
Oh, yeah. Rancho Sespe was 130,000 acres.
Incredible.
Yeah. The smallest one was like 5,000 acres.
Nice.
That was tiny. It looked small on the map. Yeah. So Mr. Moore has bought this rancho. There are these homesteaders who are coming out and they are settling because it's a huge piece of property. But he owns it. He gets very upset. They sort of live together somewhat precariously, and then there's one of those devastating droughts. And Tom Moore decides that he's going to control all the water on that property. Next thing you know, Tom Moore wakes up at midnight one night in March of 1878. His barn is on fire. He goes out to rescue all of his horses that were dying, and he is shot 10 times. And he was shot by the homesteaders. So that is a story that we had it up at the Ventura Museum, as I said, and we had items that the pioneers had taken across the country with them, a child's doll, for example, or somebody's a whiskey cup that somebody actually used to pay his laborers at the end of the day, right? They got paid and they got a little slug of whiskey.
Right.
So that when we have enough that we can say, okay, we have a story to tell. You all know water is a major issue.
Water is everything.
And is going to continue to be a major issue. Extreme weather is a major issue. These are things that we are still grappling with right now. There are lawsuits all over the place. And we talk about how at this one point in time, it turned into a murder. And what can we learn from that? And how do we move forward in a less violent way?
Right. It would be interesting to know, what 7-Eleven or Mini Mart is, sitting in Tom Moore's front yard today. And you would never know what happened there 100.
Absolutely. Yeah. Isn't that something? Yeah. Because wherever, if the people watching this live here in Ventura, obviously they are living in what used to be Spanish. They're living on what used to be Spanish land, and that was Mexican land, and that was, U.S. land, and was part of a rancho, and was a place where, who knows, gold was discovered in Peru before it was discovered up in
Oh, really?
Oh, no,
I never knew that.
Yeah, in the early 1840s, a farmer was out digging wild onions and found gold. It just wasn't the same amount. But anyway, who knows who's living on the site where that happened?
It's always fascinating. So what type of events does the Ag Museum host?
We actually do quite a few annual events. So thinking about it from when this is going to be out, we have a fun sip and shop at our boutique. Our gift store is really fantastic and has everything from out-of-print books to entirely new, pieces of art by local vendors, and honey and lemonade, jam, all the stuff.
All of
it's a great little stocking stuffer kind of a place. So we have that on our November 22nd when we're going to have some ballet dancers here. We have every year we do the Labor Day Tractor Fair. So this is San Paul is kind of known for the Labor Day Parade. Every year, it's the one in the county, and it ends, and we are the place to come. We're air conditioned, so it's super cool, where families can come entirely free and pet some tractors and play with some bees, make some homemade candles, do scavenger hunts in our garden. That's a really great event. And we have a lot of other lectures and series here. So yeah. Jeff Mulhart, who you may or may not have talked to.
was the book on Oxnard.
And he most recently wrote a book on the history of the lima bean. And we had the book release party here. The lecture on lima bean and lima bean hummus. That was good.
Interesting.
So we have and again, go to venturamuseum.org and sign up for our mailing list, and then everybody can get notified of everything. It's free. We don't bother you too much. I promise.
Wonderful. Well, Elena Brokaw, I want to thank you so much for being our guest on this episode of Farm Talk. We've loved having you and learning all about the Agriculture Museum of Ventura County and the history of our wonderful little corner of the world.
Thank you, Paula. It's been really a pleasure.
Absolutely. And of course, we want to thank our sponsor, Opus Escrow, and be sure to tune in next time for the next Farm Talk.